Thanks for listening to the Replatform podcast, sponsored by Attractor and Hypersonics and hosted by me, James Gurd. My wonderful co-host is off busy doing other exciting things today. Well, actually, his internet connection's completely died at home in a modern first world city that is London, which is crazy. A warm welcome, which is your first episode. We put a lot of time and effort into bringing amazing guests and really cool content to you for free. Help us keep it that way, please. You can refer us to other people in the network, letting them know about the podcast, spread the word, share our social posts on LinkedIn and Twitter. And the biggest thing you can do to help is rate this show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening. If you like the content, it really helps boost our visibility. So thanks, and let me introduce you to today's topic and our guest. So our topic today is around understanding technology for B2C2B e-commerce retailers. So retailers like Top Styles, who have like big trade presence, but also have consumer selling, and especially businesses that are traditional in B2C selling, but also have large wholesale accounts, but might not have taken it seriously enough in terms of how they prioritize the e-commerce technology solution for those trade accounts. And specifically in the context of Adobe Commerce, and Adobe Commerce gets very much maligned in certain chords, but actually has a lot of strength in B2B and a lot of heritage there. So want to look and explore what the technology stack looks like, what's good looks like, what key features are, and who better than the founder and owner of a leading agency that works for a lot of B2C2B retailers. So warm welcome to Tom McCall from Tom & Co. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, James. It's interesting that Paul's having internet problems in central London. And I actually live in the sticks in Surrey, and we've got no internet around here. So I'm beaming over Starlink my internet connection. It seems to be more stable than his connection in London.
I feel like we jumped back to the 1980s. It's hilarious. We'll get some carrier pigeons on next. So Tom, we've known each other for a long time. We worked on various projects which have B2B elements, but interestingly, you've been on the podcast before and you've got the record for most audio plays. It's 541 for your episode, which is amazing. So how do you feel about trying to get close to that today?
Oh, I'm up for it.
Excellent. And I know some people listening will know you or come across Tom & Co, others won't. So do you want to give people just a quick overview of who Tom & Co is?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so Tom & Co is an e-commerce specialist agency, and we've been going for over 10 years now. We're a sort of a team of nearly 80 people with many different disciplines, but a really talented bunch of people. We've got a really strong focus on quality of service and quality of product. And what people might know about us, and certainly from our last podcast, is that we typically build in a headless setup. That's something that we've mastered over the last 8 years, and something we're very proud of. But we also exist in the world of B2B. So we have many clients that are operating both B2C and B2B sites, and something that we've also become a specialist at over the past few years.
Excellent. And yeah, interesting, because I think when I started working with you several years ago, it was the first time I'd encountered like a mature solution for headless rather than a conceptual discussion about it. So let's dive into it. So yeah, we are unashamedly focused on B2B. Just to set expectations, we're not talking about like big complex verticals like manufacturing, for example. We are focused on businesses that have both that consumer and business element, and understanding that technology needs to be used slightly differently for those trade account purposes, and dig into some of the nuances. So let's start with like, I guess a good positioning question, Tom, is we know that replatform is challenging. Every project, regardless of size or scope, encounters problems and challenges. I mean, I used to have more hair and energy before I started doing replatforming, that's for sure. You work with a lot of like B2C2B retailers. We've referenced Top Styles, and Lemieux is another example. Can you talk us through the B2B specific challenges that retailers face when migrating to a new platform?
Yeah, sure. So I think the kind of the B2B, B2C approach is something that's grown a great deal over the last few years. And actually, if you go back 10 years when I started the agency, it's not something that we came across particularly often. Companies weren't really thinking about how to optimize their B2B offering. They were certainly in the B2C space, and they may have had some kind of B2B e-commerce presence, but it wasn't getting a lot of attention from businesses at the time. And over the last few years, we've certainly noticed that companies have seen the opportunity of B2B commerce, and they're really looking to kind of strengthen their offering there. I think, there's still quite a lot of inexperience in companies in kind of B2B commerce, and some of the typical challenges, especially when you're thinking about a joint project of B2C and B2B, is really you're actually tackling two projects at once. There's a lot of crossover and cost efficiency in doing both at the same time. But you also need to make sure that when you approach these projects, you do think about both sides a little bit differently, which might sound a bit obvious, but there are real specific needs on B2B that you don't see on B2C. And of course, B2C is very much a design, a brand focused website, and you'll go through a lot, usually a very long, in-depth process of thinking about how the website looks, feels, and that's really important to making a successful B2C website. But when you're working on a B2B website, that focus really does change. And although those areas are still important, I'll talk about why a bit later on. More of the focus on a B2B website is around the functionality, and specifically, very, very specific functionality for B2B needs that doesn't exist on a B2C website. And you're also focusing a lot on kind of the efficiency of the process. B2B customers, a lot of the time, they want to be on and off your website very quickly, and they want functionality that's going to allow them to do that easily. So, some of that functionality you might think about that is specific to B2B is things like organizational setups. So it's not just a single account that you're dealing with anymore. It's an organization, a company, and there may be a subset of users within them. And you want to think about how you set that up and how the settings and permissions cascades down through that particular setup. Other things like bulk purchases, quotes, and the list goes on in terms of that kind of specific functionality. So there's some of the key challenges that you need to start thinking about. And I think it's very important to find a development team and a partner that really understands B2B. That's crucial to the success of the project, because it's not like the standard B2C e-commerce website that you typically see. That said, the skills that you learn on building a B2C website do transfer very well over to a B2B. And so you get a really good head start in terms of your B2B offering. But yeah, getting that kind of that understanding at the beginning and the specific parts of B2B is crucial to having a successful project.
Attract, your complete product discovery growth engine. Create relevant shopping experiences that convert into sales and grow online revenue with personalized search, merchandising, and recommendation solutions powered by AI. Find out more at attract.com.
A lot of the businesses I've worked with tend to have like the trade account management over to one side and not integrated with e-commerce planning. So they might have a very basic portal, which is literally just like a catalog rather than any functionality. But most sales then happen still manually or by phone, and it's involved a lot of salespeople, and it's manual, and it's not efficient. Then they get towards when those teams are then brought into the fold of like a replatforming project, they're not used to technology selection. So I'd love you to give your like advice on what makes a difference when it comes to B2B technology selection. What influences the decision and why? Because we know there are loads of functional capabilities that don't fundamentally influence a platform decision. So what should people be looking at in the technology?
Yeah, I think those are really interesting points, actually. And I this comes back to the point I was making about, it's actually quite new to the industry, B2B e-commerce specifically. Business very much used to running their B2B operations over the phone, and introducing technology into it is obviously a massive efficiency gain. But also is putting that requirement on a team within the business that is probably not familiar with or as familiar with e-commerce technology and what what the advantages are. So I think, like with any project, and James, you'll know this very well, kind of making sure you understand your requirements before you do anything is absolutely key. You've got to think about the specifics of your B2B business and what your B2B customers are going to need out of the platform. I think it's also important to realize that not all e-commerce platforms, even ones that are fantastic in the B2C space, are particularly good in the B2B area. And actually many platforms completely ignore B2B and focus entirely on B2C. So as you get those requirements together for your B2B functionality, you need to be thinking about the platform and what you get out of the box in terms of B2B. Just to list a few things, I mentioned kind of the organization structure. That's a really important one. You usually have some kind of approval flows. So trade customers perhaps can make an account that goes into a pending state and then needs to go through an approval flow. Different businesses have different requirements for how they approve those trade accounts. But having a platform that is able to facilitate that is really important. Thinking about things like price structures. I mean, this is always a really painful one on B2B. You don't have the luxury of the B2C pricing structure, which is typically, you've got one price for a product for everyone. You might run a promotion every now and again, and that's usually the end of the complexity in terms of pricing. On B2B, it very quickly gets very complicated. You quite often have pricing structures for groups of your B2B customers. You might even have a pricing structure specific to one B2B customer. And so making sure that platform that you choose is able to cater for those pricing structures is really, really important. As well as that, you've got kind of catalog visibility. Again, this is where it differs from B2C. B2C, you show everyone everything that you have, whereas B2B, you quite often want to limit the catalog for individual companies. So you show them a subset of your catalog. And that is really important that your platform can provide that functionality in an easy, manageable way, because as you grow your number of B2B customers that you have, that can become quite complicated and quite difficult to manage. So thinking about that is key. And then you've got some more of the kind of end user experiences that you want to provide for your B2B customers. So allowing them to order quickly, although having your product listing, product pages and basket flow is still useful for a B2B customer, you also need to be able to give them quicker ways to order. They might, for example, be replenishing their stock. So they know exactly what they want. They pretty much know the quantities that they want. They just want to get in, reorder that stuff, restock their shelves, and get out as quickly as possible. And then on top of that, you might have things like quotes, which are really good if you have customers that are doing larger orders. And perhaps you want to offer them a bit of a discount so they can submit a quote, and you can have a bit of back and forth over that quote and offer them a discount on top of their personalized pricing structure. And then lastly, one of the other key bits of functionality is order flow approval. So when you're working in a B2B setup, you have an organization, perhaps it's got 2 or 3 users or more, because you have many more. I think the average is about 11 per organization from research that Adobe completed. You might only want to allow some of them to actually approve the order. So you can have a buyer go through and put together an order, and then they need to pass it off to their manager or to their finance team for final approval, which would then push it through as an order. So those requirements are key, and getting that requirements list together is going to help you through your platform selection.
Yeah, I'm glad you called out pricing, because when people haven't been through this process before, if you don't get people who are responsible for different areas, whether it is like defining the price points and the discounts for the account, then the marketing team doing promotion campaigns, You don't get that joined up thinking of when a discount's eligible, not eligible, what quantity discounts are available, and are they available to all types of account, or do the size of the discounts vary between tiers? Yeah, it's so important to have that joined up thinking, and I guess that's one of the most important things in the requirements section is capturing everything each person needs and then working out those interdependencies. So let's come on to specifically a business like Topps Tiles, because we talked about it before. They're a huge business. I think you said something like 125,000 trade customers, something like that. I mean, it's a huge number. And you mentioned earlier about account management structure, and this to me is one of the areas that often gets underestimated in terms of mapping it out clearly to know how account structures need to be enabled within a platform. And some platforms might have basic B2B, but you can't get past a very simple parent-child setup. You can't do complex account structures where you have lots of, for example, a business that then has subsidiaries. So I'd love you to talk about, in a business like Topps Tiles, have a lot of trade customers. What are the business technical reasons for using like an Adobe Commerce B2B? Well, how does it benefit them from that account structure point of view?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's actually bigger than just an account structure point of view, in terms of, why specifically Topps Tiles wanted to be on Adobe Commerce, or why they felt that was the right platform for them. And it certainly differs for every customer when they're looking at their requirements. But it is true that, Topps Tiles is a very large trade site, and it is around about 125,000 active trade customers. So from that sense, it's almost a bit more like a B2C site than a B2B in terms of the quantity of trade customers that they're dealing with. But one of the main deciding factors for them was that they wanted to have a customer-centric approach to their B2B. And with Adobe Commerce, Adobe Commerce is fantastic at being a single platform that is very flexible, can offer different experiences for different approaches, whether that be B2C and B2B. And for Topps Tiles, their B2B website is very large as well. And so it was really key that a single platform could deliver an extremely good B2C experience, as well as a really good B2B experience as well. And so that was a really big driving factor behind choosing Adobe Commerce as a platform. And anyone who's familiar with that platform knows that it has a very flexible architecture. It's got this, it's had it for many years, since Magento 1, in this sort of setup where it's got a website, a store, and a store view. And there's sort of 3 levels, 3 tiers that you can configure and change the platform. And that works extremely well for having a B2C and a B2B website without running into limitations of having those 2 quite separate experiences on a single setup. And then on top of that as well, I think they were attracted to the headless approach that Tom & Co takes, because that also adds additional flexibility and freedom, especially on how we represent the front end of the website to B2C customers and to B2B customers. We can really tailor that experience while breaking free of any limitations the platform might have introduced. And it's also important to understand, this customer-centric approach is because Topps Tiles, quite often their trade customers can be a little bit more like B2C customers than your kind of normal B2B website. And that's because it's made up of lots of small, can be independent tilers and builders, up to small LTDs. So often the trade customer is actually an individual that we're dealing with, but it also can be part of an organization. And so we were able to build the B2C website, and then add the additional functionality required for B2B. And by taking that approach, we were able to reduce the amount of work required to deliver both B2C and B2B. And of course, that that also had an impact on reducing the timeline, reducing the cost and the speed to market. So that was a really attractive approach for Topps Tiles, and it's worked out really well for them.
Hypersonics helps e-commerce companies make more profit every day. This AI-driven platform delivers recommendations for pricing and inventory that lead to bigger profits. Visit hypersonics.ai/podcast to get a free trial.
And we talked about the account management piece. I know you've got other customers who've got a strong B2B presence, like Lemure, and we both worked on that project, which is quite an interesting one as well. I'd love to know, how far are you pushing the B2B capability? What are some of the interesting applications of the B2B functionality beyond the basic stuff of we're selling products to trade customers?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so out of the box with Adobe Commerce, in terms of B2B, it's incredibly fully featured. But I also believe that, no platform should try and do everything, because it often introduces too much complexity. And I think from the B2B side, Adobe Commerce has got a good balance from that perspective. And that allowed us to really accelerate the development of Topps and the other B2B websites that we've created. But some of the areas where we had to add additional functionality, and actually, this is one of the great things about Adobe Commerce, is that it allows you to very easily add additional functionality. So a couple of examples which are quite interesting from Topps' perspective were, a mixed basket is a good example of that. So Topps Tiles customers often need to purchase very quickly. If you imagine it's an independent builder or tiler, they are most likely going to be on a job, tiling someone's kitchen or bathroom. When they need to place an order, that could be, perhaps they've run out of some adhesive, or they need more tiles. These guys want to be able to very quickly make an order and pick it up. So what we were able to do is provide a service called Express Click and Collect. And Express Click and Collect basically allows us to show those trade customers what is available in those stores nearby. So with Topps Tiles, one of the things about Topps Tiles is most places in the country, you're never more than about 20 minutes away from a Topps Tiles. They've got over 300 stores. So being able to see what stock each of those stores has and present them to the trade customer and offer them this Express Click and Collect service was a real game changer in terms of getting those trade customers to engage with the online B2B website. And so to do that, we had to integrate with their ERP system, which is Microsoft Business Central 365, and we were able to then pull the actual stock that is available in each of the stores and then show that on the website, thus allowing an express click and collect, which essentially means once you place the order, it's immediately available for collection from the store. So these traders who are working on their jobs are able to place the order, get in their van, drive down to the local Topps Tiles and pick up the product and get straight back onto the job, which was a really nice bit of functionality. But it's something that we know we can push further, and part of the next phase of development for the Express Click and Collect is to offer a true mixed basket. So trade customers are able to order items that are from immediate collection, items that are for next day collection, or even items that are going to be delivered to on site, all within a single transaction. So that was a really interesting bit of functionality that we had to add on top of Adobe Commerce. And then another one that we did for them was around loyalty. As you can imagine, B2B customers are buying quite frequently. In the world of Topps Tiles, they can almost be buying on a daily basis as they move on to their next jobs. So one of the things Topps Tiles wanted to introduce was a rewards program for their B2B customers, and they called that Rewards Plus. And basically that meant that whether you are buying online or in store through your trade account, you were accumulating points, and those points can then be exchanged for discounts or goods that are actually outside the realm of what Top Style sells. So, for example, you can get a PlayStation on your points. So it's really trying to build that loyalty into those trade customers, and get them to come to Top Style stores rather than one of their competitors. And that loyalty scheme on the B2B side was actually a huge success, and that was measured through customer satisfaction, which they saw increased by over 80%.
Cool. And let's move on to quotations, because this is an area that I've got personal interest in. I've worked on a few projects recently where quotations has been a massive part of the sales process and a huge revenue driver. And it becomes potentially complex when you've got multiple people involved, you've got multiple stages. It's not just a single decision maker. I'd love to know, like, how are you using the e-commerce platform to do the initiating, management of quotes, then turning them into orders? Are there any additional like tools you use on top of Adobe Commerce, or are you finding Adobe actually pretty effective at delivering a quotation functionality?
Yeah, so funny enough, quotes is something we've been doing for a long time, and actually we started doing it on B2C rather than B2B. So we many years ago, actually, this is even back to Magento 1. So we've worked with a couple of sofa brands over the years, and one of the really nice bits of functionality that we implemented for them was quotes. And this was used in a slightly different setup. We have B2B examples, but so this was used in showrooms where customers would come into the store, and buying a sofa is actually quite a complex process and requires a lot of thinking. And you've got to do things like making sure the sofa fits in the space, so taking measurements, and making sure it fits through the door, and all of that kind of stuff. And to help improve conversion, our customers were finding that customers would come into the store, they really like the sofa, but they wouldn't make a decision there and then, because they would need to go back and think about it and do those measurements and make sure that it's the right sofa for them. So we actually introduced a quote functionality, which basically allowed the store staff to be able to sit down on a sofa next to the customer and put together a quote for the sofa that they were sitting on. They would be able to configure the various different fabrics and build up a quote that they could, obviously they would try and convert that in store, but if they weren't able to convert that in store, they could put in all of the customer details, and they could send that quote off to the customer, who could then take that home and have a think, perhaps at the end of the day, have a glass of wine and think, yeah, actually that is the sofa I do want. And they would be able to log into the website, and their quote would be available within their account. And actually all they would need to do at that point is put in their payment details and convert it. So we've got a sort of long history with quotes where we actually build a lot of custom functionality to do that on the B2C side. And then fast forward to today, a lot of what we do in terms of quotes is on the B2B side of things. And actually these days we don't need to build custom functionality for quotes, because at least within Adobe Commerce, the quote functionality is really quite complete. And that basically means that, so for your trade customers, they are able to create their own quotes now. So very much the same way you fill up a basket. In fact, you are filling up your standard basket. You then have the ability to convert that into a quote. And generally, the driving force behind turning that into a quote rather than just putting it through as an order is because they would like to negotiate a discount. So the functionality there for quotes is really important, that not only can you generate a quote that's stored against your account that you can reference later, but you can interact with the merchant over that quote. So you may say, this is a particularly big order that I want to put through. Is there any kind of discount that you could give me? And then that within Adobe Commerce admin, that trade customer can then actually go into the quote, they can apply a discount, they can message the customer back, and that quote can then be converted. And that will then go into an order. And the great thing about that is you've got visibility of all the quotes sitting on all of the accounts. You can encourage that last bit over the line. And, B2B customers that are operating over the phone, be very much aware this happens in the back and forth conversations with customers. But yeah, this is a way of introducing technology to really facilitate that process, make it far more efficient, and help get these quite often larger orders across the line.
And obviously, you don't just do builds; you then do support maintenance. You have ongoing relationship with your customers. Yeah, you're helping them optimize their sites. You'll see them, what's working, what's not for them. I'd love to hear what have you and the team at Tom & Co founder the most important like trade account features, because I found on a few projects people get overexcited about like building a custom product finder, for example, and it doesn't get used. But something which seems really basic and obvious, like a quick order form where you can like bulk upload from a spreadsheet, or you can just type in the SKUs and instantly push that into a basket. Suddenly, that's the one that gets massively used, even though it's a more simple and less exciting feature. What do you find? Like what do the trade customers most use on a website to drive revenue, conversion?
Yeah, that CSV one is an interesting one actually, because that's not an out of the box piece of functionality, and we implemented that for a customer called Lemure, who are an equestrian brand, and they've got a lot of stockists, your usual type of stockists that you'd see on a B2B customer base. And so one of the key things that they wanted available was that these stockists could pull a report from their own ERP systems or stock management systems, and be able to just upload that CSV to the website and then very quickly order. So that functionality, we actually built some functionality that allowed them to do that created a basket, and then they're just able to submit that and convert it. Really, really neat bit of functionality, and really well used by their customers. But yeah, typically other things that we would see used from a B2B perspective in terms of functionality is company and user setup is really key. Just because most B2B customers, if they are stockists, they generally have more than one person logging into the system, and being able to make sure that all of the orders from the different users that are logging in are associated back to a single organization is really important from a financial perspective, and audit and traceability perspective. So that's a key one that always gets implemented on all of our B2B setups. Other things like, quick ordering, that's really key. Making sure that you do have a fast way for people to check out. Bulk discounts, another one that's really key. And actually this comes back to the complexity around price structure setups. Not only having individual price structures, but being able to offer bulk discounts. So, if you're buying 200 items, then perhaps you're going to provide a step discount for that particular purchase. And then the other things that I mentioned, quotes very often get implemented. Restricted catalogs is usually a key one, and approval workflows as well. So making sure when you place that order, if that person doesn't have the ability to authorize it, that they can then pass it on and notifications go out to their manager or the finance department that can then approve and push that through. So yeah, I would say that they are the key ones that get implemented time and time again.
And the process, the finance stuff you talk about is so important, because I've seen this many times and recommend to people is you've got to engage the finance people about when you're doing all of this customer facing activity, whether it's quotations, discounts, promotions, tier pricing, how does that have to come through in the data back into the ERP to facilitate the financial reporting, reconciliations, when they recognize sales, when they don't. It's such an important thing to flag up to anybody launching B2B sites, to get the finance people involved So
100%. Yeah. I mean, quite often we will have a completely separate workshop just to talk to the finance department to work out exactly how that information needs to be fed through to their system. Because, yeah, like you say, each finance department works slightly differently as well. And, making sure that you account for all of the beans so they can count them is a very important part of the process.
Yeah, exactly. Even down to simple things of them suddenly wanting a particular discount, like say quotation discount. They want to report on that separately and analyze it separately, and having to have that come through as a custom field or a custom flag, so they know that this discount isn't just a marketing discount; it is actually part of a sales process. Yeah, it's interesting that those things are underestimated in terms of how much time needs to be taken to map it out. So another question I've got for you, and interestingly, we had Jodie from Lemure on a few weeks back, a really good podcast about what was it like to be in your first replatforming project from the client side and advice on that. Very good. One of the things that she flagged, and I've come across this in other projects, is that they wish they'd spent a bit more time thinking about the B2B user journey and not just basically taking the consumer journey that was gone through from a design ideation point of view and then overlaying B2B functionality. So I'd love to know, because you've worked across lots of different projects, what should retailers be thinking about? How does the approach differ, and what are the risks of just treating all the customers the same?
Yeah, this is a really, really important part of the B2B project, and it's often one that doesn't get the time, and that's partly because people see B2B as a very functional project, and so when you go into those B2C projects, it is very front loaded towards thinking about how you represent the brand and the products, what you need to communicate, what the key messages are, and so on. And then you go into these B2B projects, and it's very much about, what is the key, a lot of the functionality we've just talked about, how are we going to deliver that? There's so much complexity around it that it is very draining, and it takes up a huge part of your project and your budget and your thinking time. But yeah, the UX of a B2B website is actually really important, and something that I would really advocate people spend more time thinking about. And there are typically a couple of really kind of two different types of journey, although you can really get into the weeds on this and think about all of your different B2B customers. But you do still have B2B customers that are going on that more experience-led journey, trying to work out what products are going to be right for them, which is more typical to what you see on a B2C site. So you're thinking about having richer product detail pages. You're thinking about making sure that you get the key selling points for each product across. You might need technical information about those products. You might want setting information about those products. So it really thinking about kind of how rich the information needs to be for that particular journey. And at Tom & Co, the approach we take is to have to use the kind of a more kind of B2C structure for the B2B website, to allow people to browse product listing pages, to allow them to browse product detail pages, and to think about the information that needs to go onto each of those pages for your B2B customers. So I would say, it's important to go through the usual process of doing a site map, doing a content map, doing wireframes, and thinking about the different use journeys that people are going to go through, and really designing out that process and not just relying on default layouts for B2B. If you get that right, then you can really help to broaden the types of products that individual B2B customers are buying. And if you don't have that, then typically what you'll see is they'll buy the same things over and over. Because it's very difficult for them to explore and discover new products if it's just a list of SKUs and quantities. But that said, that journey is highly inefficient for B2B customers when they know what they want. And actually, for Lemure, one of the key successes of the B2B website was that customers were spending up to 2 hours putting through their orders. It was a very slow process, and we in implementing a better kind of UX for that process, we managed to get that down to 10 minutes. So that's the other side of the journey where trade customers want to be in and out as quickly as possible. And we did that through implementing quick checkout lists. So instead of having your kind of usual product listing and product detail pages and basket, we created a basket page which essentially has all of your products in your catalog available. This isn't always a good approach. If you've got a very large catalog, you might need to think about a different way of solving this. But we created a sort of a basket that has all of the products available, essentially set to quantity 0. And then you can very quickly filter and search those products, and then punch in your quantities that you want for those products. So if you think you've got that list, you might be able to run down that list in 10 minutes, put in your quantities, 10 of these, 20 of these, 30 of these, and essentially it is your basket that you can then submit and process that order. So I think that this is where, if you spend the time thinking about the user experience and the journey for B2B, you can massively improve that experience for your B2B customers. And of course, in doing that, it's going to be that they're going to come back more often and purchase from you more often.
Yeah, I think even if you don't have the time and capacity, even just to make some fundamental changes to the navigation, to prioritize features like quick buy, just to elevate things, or even merchandise your homepage differently, because you're right, the desire to speed up purchasing is one part of it. That's the essential bit, right? Is get people in and out of checkouts quickly when they need to place an order, so you don't block them from giving you money. But fundamentally, the product discovery bit, I think, is often underrated on trade sites of, well, don't you want your trade customers to be selling a wider portfolio of products, as long as there's no restrictions in terms of who can buy what from you? But yeah, the ability for them to discover additional product ranges that might expand their purchasing portfolio, that's a really interesting point you made.
Yeah, I fully agree with that as well. I mean, the navigational changes is something we do very often. So having a different navigation on B2C versus B2B is really important. People shop in very different ways when they're interacting with B2B. And then other simple things as well, like, on the B2B website, having a VAT toggle. So you can toggle including VAT and excluding VAT prices. So just these little things that you can introduce on your B2B website that just make it a better experience for your B2B customers is really crucial to improving that experience.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a really good takeout of this session is basically put some CX and UX effort into it. Don't just assume that the consumer journey is right. And speak to trade customers. It's amazing, actually, from having worked on a lot of these projects. Trade customers are often the most willing and able to give you honest feedback about pain points, issues, what would help them better. You sometimes get a more reliable set of data out of them than on consumer surveys. So I know a few businesses who've got really good feedback from their trade customers from a survey, picking up the phone. It brings me on to my final question, Tom, which is, do you have a view on where Adobe's B2B specific roadmap is headed? I've not looked at it actually this year to see if anything new has come out. Is it a focus? Are they more focused on B2C, or are they just maintaining the already quite rich functionality that they've got?
It is definitely a focus. I think one thing that Adobe Commerce have realized around their platform in the last few years is that from a B2B or from a B2C, B2B perspective, it's an extremely powerful platform and really has a good foothold on the market there. So it's something they continue to invest in, which I'm very pleased to see, because I think that kind of B2C, B2B market is rapidly growing at the moment, and businesses are realizing that there's huge opportunity and efficiency gains to move their B2B into an e-commerce platform. So yeah, the last couple of years they've done a lot of stuff. So they've introduced better approval workflows for orders. They introduced these replen lists, so replenishing your stock quickly. They put better logging and auditing in for companies, so you can see what your users within an organization are doing. One close to my heart is that they've improved the API coverage for B2B, which is really important for a headless approach, because a headless front end requires those APIs in order to display the information. So they've really done a good job of making sure that the B2B APIs are available, so that you can take that headless approach if you want to. And they also focused on scale as well. So actually, one of the things that's sort of underlooked or sort of missed, I guess, when you're thinking about B2B is scale. And that doesn't necessarily mean, the number of orders that you're taking. It's often scale in terms of complexity. So coming back to pricing structures again, the pricing structures, when you have individual pricing structures, this can scale up the complexity very, very quickly. And if the system is not optimized for that, you can find it getting very, very slow as you introduce new, more and more price lists. So that was a big focus for them for improvement, and it's incredibly efficient from that perspective now. And then another thing that's overlooked is basket sizes. So, on a B2C site, you might have one or two, or, a few of our clients might be hitting the sort of the up to 10, maybe getting into double figures. But on B2B, you can see that being hundreds, and more. And that actually introduces quite a lot of challenges for a platform to process those large baskets. And that's something that, again, Adobe have focused on and made massive improvements for catering for large baskets, so that you don't get these big slowdowns happening as your basket size increases.
So wasn't aware of that. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, it's an often overlooked thing, and actually, it's not something you discover until very, very late on in the project. I mean, you're usually live for a few weeks before you start realizing, damn, the promotional rules and price discount roles and so on a very large basket can really start to slow it down. And I'm talking, tens of seconds to process, which can be very frustrating for your customers.
Yeah, that brings us nicely back in a circular loop to the first point you made about really being crystal clear on your requirements, and that involves core requirements and edge cases. I think planning for edge cases is so important in this type of project. It doesn't mean that you wouldn't select a platform if the edge case isn't 100% covered, but how would you resolve an edge case so that you don't then suddenly discover all these little customer experience gaps? Cool. Well, that's been that. Tom, really appreciate you coming on. There's a lot of really interesting, useful information there for people. If anyone wants to probe further with you or got any questions about some of the Adobe or B2B capabilities we've been talking about, how do they reach out?
Yeah, I mean, more than happy for people to reach out and have a chat. You can reach me on LinkedIn, or you can email info@tomandco.uk if you want to talk to us about a project that you have. Yeah, more than happy to have a chat. So if anyone wants to get in contact, please feel free.
Excellent. Thanks everyone for listening. As always, keep your ears open for the next episode. We drop one every week. Let us know of any topics you'd love us to feature in the future. And also, don't forget to give us that rating wherever you're listening or watching. It really does help us get our visibility up. Thanks so very much, everybody. Take care. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host Paul Rogers via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.